Hey, YouTube! Guess what time it is? Well, it's 5:18 on Thursday, September 4th, but that also means football is back! And that can only mean one thing. The FFSR. The Fantasy Football Stock Report is back. Welcome to it. Chris Fearson here, as always, coming at you with another season, the 2014 edition of the Fantasy Football Stock Report. This is your home for who is hot, who is not, who to start, who to sit. You guys have subscribed to this for a long time. You guys know where to come to. And again, I thank you so much for doing that and for being a part of this. I really appreciate your guys' support and understanding. I was going to try to get this video recorded and uploaded yesterday, but I had some technical glitches with the computer, trying to get another video uploaded as well. My buddy Nate, who you guys know, you've seen on the show before, we were going to do the show yesterday and try to get another video uploaded. Didn't work out. Had a couple hitches, got pulled away to personal stuff. So a lot went on yesterday why I couldn't do the video, but I am now recording it for you tonight. Before the first official game of the regular season. So a lot to get to, a lot to talk about in this video, a lot to discuss. Now, for those of you who are new to the FFSR and have not seen my videos before, basically, here's how it works. I mean, this week is going to be obviously a little bit different because we're going to be kind of previewing on a game-by-game basis, you know, who we look at, because this is the first week. So really this week, really, we can't really gauge a whole lot from the teams themselves, because they, during preseason, aren't really gauge a whole lot because they don't play the starters all the time. Really, preseason is really all about training camp and who shines in the games, who earns their spots, that kind of thing. But now the 53-man rosters are set for all the teams. We know for the most part who's healthy and who's not, who's active and who's not, who's suspended and who's not. Looking at you, Josh Gordon and Wes Welker. Darn you, Wes Welker. On my team. So a lot to break down, a lot to talk about, a lot to discuss. So really in this video what we're going to do for the Week 1 preview is we are going to go on a game-by-game basis, really kind of look at, but we're also going to kind of look at positions as well. First I'm going to kind of highlight the games that I think are really going to produce a lot of fantasy points for your team this week. The guys really you should start on a most part across the board. And then we'll look at the games really that I don't think are really going to produce a lot in terms of fantasy potential. Then we'll really look at the guys that you really need to have in your lineups this week, and then guys who are really maybe not too fond of as well. So, and we'll break it down by position. We'll go the main skill positions first: quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends first, and then we'll kind of look at the kickers and the DSTs last. Now, as the season goes along, as we go into next week, kind of in the mid-break between the end of week, like for example, the end of Week 1 and into Week 2, we'll recap the previous week's results of who was hot and who was not, and then we'll kind of fast forward as to who you should feel about these guys going into Week 2. And we'll also talk, of course, about the waiver wire. The waiver wire is always important when it comes to fantasy football. Even though you might draft a great team, there can be a lot of changes that happen throughout the season. Again, suspensions, injuries, a lot of things can happen that can affect your team. Believe me, I know. I'm a veteran of this game. I think this is now my 10th season playing this, so I've been around the block. Let's just say that. I've only won one title. It is very tough to win championships, but I've made a lot of playoff appearances as well. So it takes a lot of hard work and a lot of effort to get to where we want to be in terms of fantasy football. So if you guys have come here and chosen this video, again, I thank you for that. I thank you for your support and understanding. But enough about me blabbing. Enough about the nice little FFSR, nice little up and down handwriting. Let's get to it. All right, so matchups for this week, games for the week. Obviously, the first one tonight may have huge implications for the regular season as well, but also in terms of fantasy tonight. Of course, I'm talking about the rematch from 2 years ago with the replacement official game, the Hail Mary game, Green Bay at Seattle tonight. Obviously, this is obviously there's a lot of storylines for a lot of different reasons. Both teams boast really, really good offenses, a lot of good skill players on both sides, but of course also it's about that Seattle defense. A lot of people obviously the Seahawks DST is going, probably first in the vast majority of fantasy draft season. But I tell you what, my league was a little bit of an oddball because there was a guy in my leagues, true story, took the Seahawks DST in the third round. The third round, okay? I think that's a little bit too early. I mean, you want to really boast up on the skill positions early, if it's at this point. That's just my take on the whole thing. At least that's my opinion. There's so much. I know there are only a few elite DSTs out there, but really, when it comes to DSTs, you're plugging and playing mostly on a week-by-week basis anyway, unless you get a really good unit. So I was just so surprised by that. But I got to admit, that Seahawks defense is very, very, very strong and definitely led them to the Super Bowl title last year. So obviously, this is a huge game for both sides. Obviously, I think there's going to be a lot of production from some guys on both sides. I definitely expect a lot of scoring from that game. In terms of potential, offensive shootouts, New Orleans and Atlanta, obviously, you've got Drew Brees and his bulk of talent,
especially wide receiver, the young guys like Kenny Stills, and Brandon Cooks, going up against the Falcons with Matt Ryan. Don't have Tony Gonzalez anymore, but you still got Steven Jackson in there. You got the young rookie Devonta Freeman, who might eventually usurp Jackson at running back position. Julio Jones is back, fully recovered from the foot issue. So that could definitely be one to watch as well. Cincinnati-Baltimore. Now, that one might be a little bit ugly in terms of scoring on the board, but I think the numbers will certainly potentially be still put up. You've still got two strong number 2 quarterbacks in Joe Flacco and Andy Dalton. You've got solid running backs in that game, although Ray Rice, as we mentioned, suspensions. He's out for the first 2 games, so Bernard Pierce looks to be a really good option in that game. And Andy Dalton has something to prove with Cincinnati. They gave him all that money in that contract, and he hasn't done well against Baltimore in the past. He doesn't have a playoff victory. I think he really needs to step it up. So, of course, he's got A.J. Green at wide receiver, Gio Bernard at running back, who, again, I really, really like. So, and the rookie Jeremy Hill. They released Ben Jarvis Green-Ellis. The law firm's gone. So now it's just Gio and Hill forming that 1-2 punch in Cincinnati. So keep an eye on that as well. San Francisco, Dallas. This is a matchup of 2 strong offenses, but also 2 kind of really, really bad defenses. San Francisco is banged up on the defensive side of the ball, and same with Dallas, but really haven't really to stop anybody either. So if you have a 49er on as a skill player, if you have a Cowboys as a skill player, I say definitely start him. You're starting Colin Kaepernick. You're starting Tony Romo, obviously, myself included. You're starting Dez Bryant, myself included. DeMarco Murray. Frank Gore, the concern about Frank Gore is he's getting up there in age. That's his concern. But as long as he holds up, he's going to be okay. You might want to keep an eye on Carlos Hyde, the rookie out of Ohio State. He's now the guy behind Frank Gore. Now that Kendall Hunter is out for the year, I believe torn ACL again or Achilles, something like that to that effect. So now he's the guy that goes behind him. So just keep an eye on that situation. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in that game. So that one is going to be fun as well. Obviously, Indianapolis and Denver. Again, 2 teams that played a great game the last time they met, I think last season. The Colts pulled out a thriller in that one. Peyton Manning's going to have revenge on his mind now the game's being played in Denver. You're starting all your Broncos weapons. You're starting Peyton Manning, Monty Ball, Demaryius Thomas. Who am I missing? Julius Thomas. Now you might also want to start Emmanuel Sanders because, as I mentioned in the open, Wes Welker is suspended. At first we were wondering, the concern with Wes Welker is he going to play? Because of the concussion issue. He just got his 3rd concussion in about 10 months. He might not, is he going to play because of that? But now we find out this whole story about amphetamines and Molly and the Kentucky Derby, and it just blew up. And then all of a sudden, Welker's coming out and saying, "I do not do drugs." Yeah, what does the test say, Wes? So, as far as I know, numbers never lie. Tests don't lie unless they're tainted. But For the most part, they don't. They're usually pretty accurate. So you're not going to have Wes Welker for the first 4 weeks of the season. So if you have other Broncos weapons, if you maybe picked up an Emmanuel Sanders or you drafted him late, he's a nice option to plug in this game. I think he's going to get a share of looks. T.Y. Hilton, Reggie Wayne, they're going to benefit this week as well from Andrew Luck, who I think is definitely a really solid play as well. Maybe, at tight end, I'm not really sold on either Dwayne Allen or Coby Fleener because they alternated way too much last season. That was more of a tight end by committee, a TEBC, if you will. And I'm really not sure which one is going to get a lot of the work. So I'm kind of shying away from that situation in terms of the Colts offense. Now, obviously, and the same with the running backs, because Trent Richardson has yet to prove that he is a solid option in the Colts backfield. The Colts backfield now is very thin again because Vic Ballard again is out for the year with an injury. So again, for the second time in his career, the last couple of years. So now you've got Ahmad Bradshaw, though, still back there in the mix. So maybe even Dan Herron. So there's a lot of uncertainty there at that position. I'm not sold on that either. So just keep that in mind. So other than that, you guys know in that matchup who to play and who not to. But there's just some situations still to avoid though in that game. So those are really the good ones that I think are going to be solid point producers as a whole. As for the ones I'm not really, going to see a lot of production from, Minnesota, St. Louis, I mean, really the only one you're going to get production really out of in that matchup is probably Adrian Peterson, maybe Cordero Patterson. The Vikings now are going with Matt Castle at quarterback. I don't think Castle is going to be the long-term solution for the season. I think at some point Teddy Bridgewater is going to take over that starting job in Minnesota. I just think he's looked better in the preseason overall, and I think he's going to be the better choice. But I think Patterson's still a safe play, maybe as a number 2, number 3 wide receiver. But certainly you're starting AP. Tight end Kyle Rudolph, maybe as a fallback number 2. Now for St. Louis, obviously the big story is Sam Bradford. Tore the ACL in that same knee again. They didn't think it was retore at first. Then they found out that it was. So he's done for the year again, unfortunately, for another time. Just when they thought he was going to finally prove himself to be a strong player in St. Louis. So now you go to Shaun Hill. Now, Shaun Hill is actually one of the better backups, I think, in this league. He's actually done quite well in Bradford's absence. I wouldn't say for fantasy purposes he's a legitimate option yet, but he could be a guy to keep your eye on maybe as a number 2, number 3 down the road, or someone to put on your scout team if you have a scout team in your league like CBS Sports does. Maybe put Shaun Hill on your scout team and see what he can do in this matchup, and then keep your eye on him further on down the road. Rams running backs, again, kind of a mess. Zach Stacy is going to be the main guy. I think he's going to be okay. Behind him, there's not a whole lot now behind him now that Daryl Richardson is gone. He even got released by the Jets, I think, so he's definitely losing all capability. Benny Cunningham's still there, but I think Stacy's the guy now. I think he's okay. Tavon Austin's probably the best receiver now the Rams have. Again, behind that, not a whole lot. Although Kenny Britt is intriguing to me. Kenny Britt, of course, his career has really been hampered by injury, inconsistency, off-the-field troubles. But now he's trying to restart his career in St. Louis, and it may be his last chance. So I wouldn't say Kenny Britt yet, but maybe put him, even have him on your bench or again on your scout team. Keep an eye on Kenny Britt to see if he can get something going in St. Louis. Cleveland, Pittsburgh, I'm not too enthused by, although obviously with when it comes to the Steelers, you've got Roethlisberger as an intriguing maybe number 1, number 2 option for you. Antonio Brown, you're obviously starting. Le'Veon Bell, if he plays, I think you can go with him as a number 2 back. Heath Miller at tight end is more of a maybe borderline 1, but more of a 2. Steelers defense, I think, is going to do wonders against Cleveland because, again, with Cleveland, you have no Josh Gordon. And really, Josh Gordon made the Cleveland offense. No matter who the quarterback was, you knew Josh Gordon was going to produce. But now he's done for the year with that second positive test for marijuana, supposedly, allegedly, even though Gordon says it was secondhand smoke or whatever. But again, the NFL drug testing protocol looks pretty solid here. So
He's done. Brian Hoyer is the starter at quarterback. No Johnny Manziel yet. And quite frankly, I can't say that I'm surprised with that decision based on what took place in the preseason. Yes, Manziel had some highlight moments in the preseason, and that's all well and good. But I think in the end, you want to go here with the experienced guy in this situation, and Hoyer certainly has that. So I think, based on what I saw in the preseason there, I think they did make the right choice. But I'm not sold on making Brian Hoyer a fantasy option yet. I don't think you play him. Really, I can't see really anyone playing. You want to really play for Cleveland, except maybe obviously Jordan Cameron at tight end. He's going to be a great option for you. Maybe Ben Tate. Maybe Ben Tate is Ben Tate's probably your rock solid number 2. I think Tate's a safe play. I think for now he's got a solid hold in the starting job. Hopefully, what I fear with Cleveland's running situation, though, is that he might end up being in a committee with Terrence West, the rookie out of Towson. I watched Terrence West in college at Towson, and I was certainly impressed by his running ability. He is a grinder of a runner. Grindier? Okay. Grinder. He is a grinder of a runner that I was just so impressed by to watch in college. So I hope that doesn't happen for you Ben Tate owners. But I think Tate's a decent play this week. Wide receiver now, maybe the best one they have going right now is maybe Andrew Hawkins. I don't trust Miles Austin yet. I don't think
He's an option yet. So really, that's all I can think of in Cleveland in terms of wide receiver options. Nate Burleson's already released off the team, so there's not a lot there. So just keep that in mind. Oakland and the Jets, I think, is going to be a really ugly game as well because, again, you've kind of got two not as well-known quarterbacks. Geno Smith for the Jets. Though Geno Smith, I will say, has certainly improved in the preseason. Heck, he beat out a very talented veteran in Michael Vick. So, to me, that just shows how faithful the Jets are to Geno Smith, how they're telling him, okay, we're not, yes, we brought in Michael Vick, but we trust you enough that we want you to be the guy. So they are really putting all their eggs in Geno Smith's basket and saying, here you go, run our team, be our offense, be the guy. So certainly there's that option. There's the option, though, if Smith has struggled, that Vick can come in and start. But right now, Geno's the guy, although I don't really see him, obviously, as a reliable, startable fantasy option. Maybe in this matchup against the Raiders, maybe a number 2, maybe, because it's going to be, one of those kind of ugly games. At least the stats will be decent, but the scoring won't be high. But I think he's certainly going to outperform Derek Carr. I wouldn't start Derek Carr. There's not a whole lot of Raiders really you can start. Maybe Maurice Jones-Drew is a number 2 running back, but I really can't see really any startable Raiders. No one really wide receiver right now. Wait for someone to emerge as number 1 because you got Rod Streeter, you got James Jones now there in that backfield or that wide receiving core. So I really can't endorse a tight. Michael Rivera is still a young tight end. I wouldn't endorse him yet. So there's no real startable Raiders right now. There's really no startable Jets either. Chris Johnson, I think already is way past his prime. He's not going to get, I think, a lot of work. Again, more of a number 2. Eric Decker's more of a number 2, number 3 receiver in the Jets. He was a number 1 in Denver, obviously, but now he's gone to the Jets. I think more of a number 2, number 3. I can't even tell you who the Jets tight end is. I think it's that Cumberland guy. I honestly don't know who their tight end is. The last tight end I knew from the Jets was Dustin Keller, and so yeah, that game I don't like a whole lot of options. Washington, Houston, I think is going to be pretty ugly. Defense is going to really put a lot of pressure on Washington. I'm not, RG3, more of a number 2, desperate number 3 play for me, in my opinion. Now, Alfred Morris, I think, could be a really, solid option. Maybe, again, more of a solid number 2, but I think he's certainly usable this week. Pierre Garçon is certainly usable this week. Jordan Reed at tight end is definitely a usable fantasy option for you. So at least a couple guys you can have in your lineup for sure. But just temper expectations because that Houston defense now with Watt and Clowney is very, very strong. As in terms of Houston's offense, obviously I'm not sold on a lot of these guys. Now, obviously, Arian Foster, I think you can go with him and be safe. Andre Johnson. I think DeAndre Hopkins is certainly playable as a number 2, number 3 wide receiver as well.
but not quarterback. I'm not sold on Ryan Fitzpatrick. I know, and again, I know I've said it when he was in Tennessee. I was not sold on Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, you remember the mob guy, Ryan. I wasn't sold on him. So I'm not sold on him in Houston yet either. So just keep that in mind. And then other than that, there's really just a lot of mismatches this week as well. Philadelphia is going to beat up on Jacksonville. Start your Eagles. In terms of the Jags, I have Toby Gerhart on my roster, but I'm not starting him this week because I want to see what he can do first. But he's going up against a Philly run defense that is very, very strong. So I think more of a number 3 or a flex this week for Gerhart. I'm not sold on him just yet in terms of playing him yet. Let him see what he can do. This is his first starting role, so he's got a tough matchup out of the box. So just temporary expectations on Toby Gerhart. Chicago's going to probably destroy Buffalo. So start your Bears. You know who: Cutler, Forte, Marshall, Jeffrey, Bennett. I mean, Robbie Gould, Bears defense. Start them all. I mean, this is probably again one of the bigger mismatches. Buffalo is still a young team. Really, the only players you can really start for Buffalo are maybe the running backs: C.J. Spiller, Fred Jackson. Don't play E.J. Manuel. Sammy Watkins is banged up. Plus, he's got Manuel as his quarterback, which is holding him back. Scott Chandler is only good when he scores touchdowns, so not sold on the Bills. Tennessee, Kansas City, I think is going to be a one-sided affair too. I think the Chiefs are going to roll in that game. Alex Smith, I think, is a very serviceable number 2 option for you, maybe even a low-end number 1. Obviously, you're starting Jamal Charles. He's a given every week as long as he's healthy. Dwayne Bowe, I think, to me, is more of a kind of 2-3, kind of on the edge. Certainly, I think he's playable. Maybe he can get you a touchdown this week. Tight end Travis Kelce is really coming along strong in that Kansas City. He's a potential sleeper. He's a dark horse. I think he could be maybe a low-end 2, high-end 3. Certainly a guy to watch on your scout team as well in Kansas City as well. So that's, I think, going to be a one-sided affair. In terms of Tennessee, now Jake Locker is certainly coming on strong in Tennessee. I think, again, he's more of a number 2 option there as well now that he's fully healthy again. Bishop Sankey is, yes, he's the rookie, and yes, the starting job is now his now that Chris Johnson is gone, but is it really? I mean, they still got Sean Green there. Avoid Tennessee's running backs till they sort that situation out. I'm not really sold on either right now. See who starts, whether it's Sankey or Green, and then we'll see what goes on from there. So we'll monitor that situation as well. Let's see, who else? Wide receivers. Kendall Wright, obviously, I think is a good start for you this week. Keep an eye on Justin Hunter. I think Justin Hunter is going to be a real surprise this season as well. I had him on my scout team and someone picked him up, but I think he's going to be one to watch this season. I'm not really sold on Nate Washington. He's more of a deep ball threat still, and I'm not fully sold on him. Tight end Delaney Walker, I think, is definitely someone who's serviceable as a 1-2 at tight end, so keep that in mind as well. New England, Miami, I think should be mostly one-sided affair. Gronk is cleared to play this week for Week 1. If you're a Rob Gronkowski owner, you can plug him in this week as your tight end for Week 1. So he's obviously a safe option. Obviously, Tom Back for New England. If it were me and I had to choose between Shane Vereen and Stevan Ridley, I would actually go with Vereen. Again, you guys
know me. If you watch my show enough, you guys know that I love these dual-threat running backs. I cannot get enough of having them on my roster. This season, I probably have 3 of them because AP is getting more involved in the passing game this season, according to reports. I have Joyke Bell out of Detroit, and I have Danny Woodhead back. So I love these dual threat backs. I want them on my roster, and if I have them, I want to play them in as soon as possible. So if you've got Shane Vereen, I think he's a great option for you this week. Maybe Stevan Ridley is more of a running back 2 or a flex, but I would certainly prefer Vereen at this point too. Stevan Ridley, because really he's also had fumbling issues in the past, and as we know, Bill Belichick is not a fan of fumbling. So keep that in mind. Wide receivers, you're definitely starting him. After Edelman, it really is kind of a big drop-off. Danny Amendola is still very, I think, even though he's very injury-prone, I think he's more of a number 3 option would be low end number 4. We don't know about Aaron Dobson yet, what he's going to do this season, or Kenbrell Tompkins. They were kind of hit and miss last season. So really the only safe play at this point is Edelman, and obviously Gronk at tight end are safe options for you as well. And then, excuse me. Oh, man. Something's trying to come up. And then Detroit and the Giants, I think that's kind of a mismatch too. Giants have looked real ugly in preseason, but again, they've kind of looked ugly for the most part lately. I think Detroit at home is a safe bet this week. Obviously, Matthew Stafford, Calvin Johnson, you know you're going to start these guys. I love Joyke Bell and Reggie Bush. I think you could start either this week. Bush as an RB1, Bell as an RB2 or flex, especially in PPR leagues. I think, and a lot of people are saying in fantasy circles that Bell might end up getting more carries than Bush in the season. I hope that happens because I picked up Joyke Bell. I got him off of waivers. Somebody put Joyke Bell on waivers, and I want to thank that owner who did that in my league because I'm going to reap the rewards from it, I think. I think Joyke Bell is going to be an outstanding play this season. I love me some Joyke Bell. So obviously, Calvin Johnson, obviously a wide receiver. Behind him, again, not a whole lot of options. Tight end, not sold on Eric Ebron yet. He's a rookie. He's proved himself a little bit. Giants, Eli, more of a number 2 still. Hasn't proved himself to be elite yet. Running back, Rashad Jennings is obviously going to be, I think a nice play. I think a solid number 2. Maybe Andre Williams vultures some touchdowns at this point in the season, which you don't want for Rashad Jennings owner, but I think at some point he's going to be more of a goal line back. Victor Cruz obviously is a safe option. Ruben Randall, I think, is more of a number 3 or a flex, especially if he becomes the red zone target like a lot of people are saying that he's going to be. I think that could be very beneficial to owners like myself of Ruben Randall. So I'm definitely going to endorse Ruben Randall because Odell Beckham right now is out, the hamstring issue. So at least he was out for all the preseason and training camp with that hamstring issue. Don't know what his availability is yet for week 1. Keep an eye on that, obviously, if you have Odell Beckham. But right now, it's Ruben Randall's job to lose the number 2 wide receiver. So other than that, I think that's it on the Giants. So and then everything else from much kind of middling matchups, just kind of average stuff like, Carolina, Tampa Bay, San Diego, Arizona. Both have good players, but nothing really jumps out at me as being, like off the page exciting either. So let's kind of go by position real quick and run down these matchups and see what we're going to get from the players here based on projection. Obviously, your safe bets when it comes to quarterback, the guys that you're definitely going to want to have locked into your lineups are guys like, the usual suspects. What the heck happened? There we go. Manning against the Colts, Breeze against the Falcons, Stafford against the Giants, Luck. Matt Ryan, I think, is a solid QB1 this week. Romo, as long as he's healthy. Brady against Miami. Nick Foles against Jacksonville, I think, is definitely QB1 material this week. Kaepernick against Dallas. Cutler against Buffalo. Russell Wilson against Green Bay. Normally, Russell Wilson, in terms of fantasy purposes, is more of a number 2. I'd say he's borderline 1-2. I think certainly he's a usable option for the week, but certainly I think Green Bay is going to be strong to come at Russell Wilson, so just keep an eye on that. Now, Aaron Rodgers going up against that Seattle defense. Obviously, you don't want to sit Aaron Rodgers, but again, I don't think you should expect a monstrous week from him going up against that Legion of Boom secondary, so I kind of see Rodgers again, kind of the same boat as Russell Wilson, more of a borderline 1, high-end 2. So just keep that in mind. I thought I had this rated by quarterback. Hang on. Okay. Here we go. Sorry, I had the rating system kind of
Boogity boo there. This thing is being really super slow. I'm not sure why. Once again, my ABG wants to install now. I don't understand why it's doing that. Alright. Who else? Kaepernick against Dallas definitely is a number one. I mentioned that. Okay. Carson Palmer against San Diego. To me, more of a high-end number two. Again, at this point, we're getting guys that to me are more number two options. Cam Newton going up against Tampa Bay. I think Carolina-Tampa Bay is going to be kind of an ugly game. Again, Newton with the rib injury, I think they've got to kind of play it safe. I think Newton's not, I think he's more of a number two in that matchup. I think they're not going to be, too crazy. He's already listed as questionable for week one, so monitor that situation, see if he plays or not with that rib issue. So just keep that in mind. More of a number two. I mentioned Roethlisberger. I think he's more of a number two this week. Again, he's got to do also with that secondary in Cleveland with Joe
Hayden, the rookie Justin Gilbert. So just keep that in mind as well. Again, RG3, Phillip Rivers, high-end number two. Dalton, more of a number two. Locker. And then after that, really, I think these guys, we're going to get into guys that really aren't as serviceable, like Geno Smith, I wouldn't recommend. Alex Smith, maybe a number two. Flacco, number two. Now, these guys after that I wouldn't touch, like Castle, McCown, Fitzpatrick, Tannehill, Eli, again, more of a maybe desperate number two, number three, but not Derek Carr, not Chad Henne, not E.J. Manuel, not Sean Hill just yet, and not Brian Hoyer. So that's kind of where they stack the quarterback position stacks up. Running backs. Must start. See LaShawn McCoy against Jacksonville. Beast mode tonight. Going up against never want to set beast mode. I learned that last season. Monty Ball against the Colts, I think, is a pretty safe option. Now, for the season, I'm not really sold on Monty Ball because he hasn't proven himself just yet. But at the same time, I think obviously now that he's pretty much, he's been handed the starting job in Denver. So, can he really lose it? I don't know. But I think a lot of people are holding out hope that Monty Ball is going to be the guy that he was supposed to be last season. So, certainly I think he's a serviceable option. AP against St. Louis, start him. Forte against Buffalo, yes. Zach Stacy going up against Minnesota. I think he's more of a number two option, but a pretty solid number two at that. Frank Gore against Dallas, 1-2 option. Eddie Lacy tonight against Seattle, yes. I think you can play him. DeMarco Murray, yes. Andre Ellington of the Cardinals against the Chargers, I think, is a very safe bet. Then after that, we're getting more into number two guys like Chris Johnson, Alfred Morris against the Texans, Doug Martin of Tampa Bay going up against Carolina, that strong Panthers defense, Arian Foster. Gio Bernard is probably one of the safer number twos out there. Le'Veon Bell. Toby Gerhardt, they have high. I don't really have him that high. Again, I have him more of as maybe a number three or a flex against Joik Bell. I love as a number two or a flex. Again, Shane Vereen, I prefer him to Ridley, but both are certainly playable. Reggie Bush, I think, is a great number one, number two option. Saints situation, Mark Ingram, Pierre Thomas. Again, if it were me, I'd probably prefer Ingram right now because I think he's actually higher on the depth chart. But I think for either are more number two options. Maybe Thomas more of a flex. I prefer C.J. Spiller to Fred Jackson, but really the only Bills I think that we're starting more as number two, number three backs this week. And then you get into the guys that are more, again, number two, number three options, like your Rashad Jennings of the Giants, Ben Tate of the Browns. Ryan Matthews going up against the Cardinals, I think, is more of a solid number two.
Jones-Drew, more of a number 2, number 3. Bernard Pierce of the Ravens, I think, is actually a really good, solid number 2 option this week, considering Ray Rice is suspended for the first 2 games. Danny Woodhead going up against that Chargers defense. Again, more of a number 3, but certainly a very strong play in PPR leagues. And then after that, again, it's kind of getting really, at this point, desperate. No Sean Moreno, not sold on him. Steven Jackson, again, not a great option this week. Trent Richardson, Sean Green. At this point, really a big drop-off. You'd be really desperate if you wanted to play guys at this point below those guys. So really not going to talk about them. Okay, on to wide receivers. Obviously, again, you guys know you're definitely going to put in your lineups. Again, Calvin Johnson, Dez Bryant against San Francisco. Your Broncos, Demaryius Thomas, Julio Jones, Brandon Marshall, A.J. Green, Michael Crabtree, Antonio Brown, definitely. I mentioned Emmanuel Sanders, going to have a big week, obviously, this week with Welker being out and for the foreseeable future, at least for these first 4 games. Jordy Nelson is pretty much a reliable Packer you can put in your lineup, even going up against that Seattle secondary. There's a lot of weapons in Green Bay, and with Nelson, Randall Cobb all at the same time. So somebody's going to get the benefits of it. It looks like it's going to be Jordy Nelson potentially, so he might be a safe bet for you, Larry.
Fitzgerald. I mentioned Cordero Patterson. I like him as an option, a strong maybe number 2 option this week. Roddy White. Again, that Falcons-Saints game I think is going to be a shootout. So certainly he's a guy you can put in there. Alshon Jeffrey. Michael Floyd is going to have, I think, a real breakout year in Arizona. I think he's certainly also a guy you can put in as a strong number 2 wide receiver. Mentioned Andre Johnson. You're not sitting Andre Johnson. As long as he's healthy, as long as he's serviceable, it doesn't matter who's throwing in the ball at quarterback. I think Andre Johnson is playable. Vincent Jackson in Tampa Bay. Now, Vincent Jackson, I think, certainly is still a strong starting option. Not ready to say Mike Evans is a starter for fantasy purposes just yet. He's obviously going to be the number 2 receiver in Tampa Bay, and he's a big, tall guy and a beast to have on the team. And it's going to be great for Josh McCown, but not ready yet to put him in lineups. Rookies, you always want to be careful with the rookies until they actually prove themselves. Then you put them in your lineups as being starters. So just keep that in mind. Eric Decker of the Jets, again, more of a number 2, maybe number 3 option. Randall Cobb, I think, again, with Seattle, it's going to be tough, but I think definitely a playable number 2. Percy Harvin is a great option, obviously. Russell Wilson's top target now is healthy, so I think he's a great option this week. Marcus Colston, I think, is a very strong number 2, number 3. Jeremy Maclin going up against the Jags, great option. I think Maclin's going to have a really strong week. As I said, start your Eagles. Julian Edelman is a great starting option for you. Golden Tate of the Lions, great to see him in Detroit now. I think he gets a much better, even though Calvin Johnson's going to get a lot of the looks in Detroit, I think Golden Tate's still going to get a share of opportunities, so I think he's a serviceable number 2, number 3 this week. Deshaun Jackson of Washington, another change of pace, but I think he's going to have maybe a strong number 2, number 3 week as well. Pierre Garcon, I mentioned, is a safe play. Keenan Allen of San Diego is going to be a great play this week. Phillip Rivers' top target. After that, we kind of fall again here into number 3 guys. Guys like Kelvin Benjamin of Carolina, again, another rookie going up against Tampa. Not sold on him being an official, maybe major starter yet, but maybe a number 3, number 4 at this point. T.Y. Hilton, more of a number 3 right now. Kendall Wright of Tennessee, certainly a very solid, probably one of the safer number 3s out there. Ruben Randall, same boat, more of a number 3. Terrence Williams of Dallas, going to get a share of looks, even though Dez Bryant gets a lot of the work, but again, more of a number 3 option. Torrey Smith of Baltimore. Brandon Cooks of the Saints, a rookie, again, more of a number 3. Reggie Wayne, certainly though a startable option for you. Victor Cruz. Riley Cooper. At this point, we're kind of getting again into the 3s and 4s. Again, Mike Evans, I mentioned, more of a number 4. I'm not sold on making him a starter just yet until he proves himself. Hakeem Nicks, DeAndre Hopkins, even more of a 3-4.
Doug Baldwin for tonight's game, more of a 3-4. Justin Hunter, I think, could actually be playable as a number 3. And again, after that, it's a really big drop-off. Guys that I wouldn't touch. That's kind of the fall-off point. If you have anyone below that, don't play them. Tight ends this week. Obviously, you guys know the elite options are, again, Jimmy Graham, Julius Thomas, Gronk. Those 3 alone, you're probably starting every week. Graham, Thomas, Gronk. If they're healthy, if they're not suspended, if they're not doing anything off the field, getting them in trouble. One might get fined for dunking over the goalpost a lot of times, Mr. Graham. But other than that, for fantasy purposes, you're starting those 3. Probably put Vernon Davis in that discussion too, number 4. You can definitely start Vernon Davis as well. Same goes for Jason Witten. Zach Ertz of Philly, I think, is also going to be a very good start this week. Again, going up against the Jaguars. I like what I've seen from Zach Ertz. I think he's been very impressive, especially in the preseason as well. With Nick Foles throwing the ball, I think he's going to be beneficial this season. I like Zach Ertz. I think you can put him in this week as well. Dennis Pitta of Baltimore, always a very reliable tight end. Definitely a solid 1-2 option. I mentioned Jordan Reed of Washington. I think you definitely play him this week. Same with Martellus Bennett, Antonio Gates. Yeah, Gates has kind of been maybe a little bit usurped by guys like Keenan Allen, Darius Green, and that kind of thing. But he's still a reliable target, so I think you can still play Antonio Gates. Greg Olsen of Carolina, I think, is still a very reliable option. As long as Cam Newton's able to throw the ball, I think he's going to be very serviceable this week as well. I mentioned Kyle Rudolph of Minnesota. To me, very, very hit or miss. At this point, we're kind of getting into the hit or miss guys. Maybe more number 2 options for you if you have a 2 tight end league. You look at a guy like Kyle Rudolph or a Heath Miller in Pittsburgh that's going to get some red zone looks. But Jordan Cameron, I think, is going to be a really safe bet this week. And then again, number 2 is more like Charles Clay in Miami, Delaney Walker, more of a solid number 2. Dwayne Allen, again, the debate with him and Kobe Fleener. And then in sleeper, I mentioned Travis Kelce of Kansas City. And after that, there's your drop-off. So, not really reliable guys after that. Okay, real quick, we'll close out here with kickers and DSTs. Your top kickers for the week based on what looks like projection. Again, kind of with the same theme as the one-sided matchups. So the game's been really, really offensive. Phil Dawson of San Francisco going up against Dallas. Gostkowski in New England. Justin Tucker of Baltimore. You drafted these guys to be your top kickers, so they're going to probably have big weeks every season, but certainly this week looking really strong. Stephen Hauschka of Seattle in tonight's game against Green Bay, always a reliable option. Dan Bailey of Dallas, Robbie Gould of Chicago. Love Blair Walsh at Minnesota. I've had him as my kicker before. The guy is a big leg. He's awesome. Now, in Denver, Matt Prater has also been suspended for the first 4 games. I don't know what's in the air in Denver, but a lot of guys are getting suspended in Denver. Just saying. But it's like, what's in that mile-high air? But Brandon McManus is now the kicker in Denver. I'm probably saying, whoo, yeah. Brandon McManus is the kicker in Denver. Now that Matt Prater's out the first 4 weeks, he's the guy. But he's projected to have a decent week this week, again, going up against the Colts in an offensive shootout probably. So he might be a guy that maybe you look at as, if you're not sold on your main guy, maybe a guy you put on your scout team later, see what he does down the road, at least within the first 4-game time frame. Matt Bryan of Atlanta should have a good week this week going up against the Saints. Same with Shane Graham. The Saints re-signed him this week to be their kicker, so he was going to have a solid week, I think, for you. Adam Vinatieri of the Colts. Cody Parkey is the kicker now in Philadelphia. He's going to have a good week, I think, obviously against Jacksonville. And after that, I think then is a really big drop-off. Because after him is Nick Folk of the Jets, and then it just drops off. So after that, not impressed with any of the guys below him. And then finally, DSTs, and again, I kind of mentioned DSTs in the matchups. I think it'd really be one-sided. Patriots against Miami. I think Texans against Washington. Great matchup. Lions against the Giants. Yeah. I would say Eagles against Jacksonville. They've got to be high on the list. Yeah, fairly high on the list. Steelers against Cleveland. Great matchup. Jets against Oakland. Hello, rookie quarterback. Yeah, I think that's. I mean that there's certainly an intriguing option. Bears against Buffalo is a dream matchup. Eagles, I mentioned, is a dream matchup. Chiefs against Tennessee, that's certainly a good matchup. Vikings against the Rams could be a potential sleeper. Other than that, I don't think really there's any others that are major must-start options. Nothing really else jumps out at me. So those are really the DSTs that you really want to for sure have in your lineup, so you're going to have good weeks this week. Everyone else thinks going to mostly struggle. Might be a few breakout performances. There usually are, but other than that, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of better options out there. That is it. That is it for the Week 1 preview. Thank you guys again so much for your support, for your
Understanding of what was going on with me and everything, with the technical things for the past couple days, and getting it out there. And always the thing to remember with fantasy is, yes, you drafted your guys, you're proud of your lineup to have it, for this is week 1. Week 1, you don't want to do anything too drastic, too crazy. So if you drafted the guys to be starters, unless you think the matchup is really against you, go with the guys you drafted. Go with the guys you drafted first. You might have made a few moves based on what other people did in your league, which I did, but nothing too drastic, nothing too crazy. Just benefit your team. Benefit what's best for you. Always watch what your players in your league do. Always be aware and vigilant of that. And we'll try to keep you aware as the season goes on. That's what we do here on the FFSR. We keep you guys aware of who's doing well, who's not doing well. Again, injuries, suspensions, all this stuff that can affect your team and your league and your game. So just keep that in mind. So thank you again so much for the support. Again, if you have any comments, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them either on the video or on the channel. Again, I will try to get to as many as I can. I am, very busy, especially again this time of year. The holidays coming up, it's going to be cray-cray. It's going to be really busy, but I will try to check my Gmail more often as weeks go on to get your get questions answered, lineup decisions, anything like that. So good luck this week. Go out there and get victory. Start the season off right with a win. We will try to get that for you, myself included. Enjoy the game tonight with Seattle and Green Bay, whoever you may be rooting for. And of course, enjoy the games on week 1. Football's back. We love it. I mean, it's the game we love, and that's the great thing. Madden 15, by the way, I highly endorse it. I highly recommend it as a gamer and as a football fan. The graphics are ridiculous. The play calling is much better. Especially, I don't know what consoles you guys have, but I have a PS4 and it looks sick on it. So I know I say that about every Madden every year, but this was certainly an upgrade from Madden 25, so definitely recommend that as well. Thank you guys again so much. God bless you guys. Have a great rest of the week into the weekend, and enjoy it and enjoy the games. Take care, and we'll see you next time right here. Your game, your team, your league, your home, the FFSR. Thanks, guys.